Welcome back to Used to Sew, a podcast about vintage sewing machines, sewing history, and sewing culture in the past and present. I am your producer and co-host, Aradia, daughter of your main host, T.R. Kelly, who is here today to talk to you about lubrication. Is it oil? Is it grease? Listen and find out. We also discuss our recent trip to the Oregon Country Fair, which was supposed to delay this episode by a week. But lucky for you, we were so reinvigorated by the trip that we've recorded 2 episodes this week and thus are already back on track to be ahead enough for me, as the producer, to not sweat bullets each week. This episode's purpose is to share, with permission, a short essay written in a Facebook group called Featherweightology by a person named David Werther on the nuances of sewing machine lubrication. We get deep into the weeds of gear types, viscosity, and the very concept of a powertrain. I learned a lot from this lecture. I'm very grateful to David for giving us permission to make content out of it, and I'm sure if you are still here listening to us after all of these tangents, you'll enjoy it too. You can also hear birdsong behind TR's voice, horror in my voice as I learned that toothpaste tubes used to be made of lead, and a decent set of geology tangents that are, in fact, mostly relevant to the discussion. Mostly.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Used to Sew with your favorite crazy old ladies in the sewing room. Well, one anyway, and her intrepid producer, Aradia, and I am T.R. Kelly, and we are back from a couple of weeks off for a massive summer festival that we go to every year. And it was colorful.
I'm inspired. The costumes, the creative uses of quilting as structures, I'm very inspired.
Yes. Even the little banners over different parts of the event. Ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, we are talking about the Oregon Country Fair. This was the 57th anniversary. We are part of the fair. I've been part of the fair since way back in the 1000s. But it is an art fair, craft fair, self-expression, and people are encouraged to dress up. And pretty much everybody has some kind of costume. And these are things that you have to make yourself or have somebody make for you. This isn't like, the amount of creativity, the amount of things I wanted to sew. And as I was saying, the little banners over each part of the fair are quilted. Now we're talking like a 30-foot long banner that says Community Village, and letters are all appliqued and zigzagged. And it's like, that banner has been part of the fair for at least 40 years that I can think of. And it gets hung up every year and put away every year. And all those little banners at the fair every year, I look at them and I'm, hello, old friend. Good to see you again. You know, I look for my favorite textiles. I know that's silly, but.
No, it helps with the wayfinding. It's a very chaotic landscape to navigate, and having the textiles each be a very unique individual piece does give you a snowball's chance in hell of not getting too lost.
So, folks, this is not a festival like laid out in neat little rows. It takes place in a forested floodplain, which is not flooded this time of year, but it's a very dense, temperate rainforest type environment with all these little hobbity booths and shacks and things. And you can't sell anything imported. Everything that is sold is made by the person who is sitting in that booth looking at you and your wonderful costume that you sewed yourself, right? Oh, what a great place to strike up conversations about, of course you made that. So you don't say, oh, did you make that? You say, wow, did you use a glue gun or zip ties?
Right. I made it a point to wear or to bring only homemade clothes with the exception of a couple of novelty t-shirts and like a pair of jeans because you need some kind of casual wear. But I made it a point to, whenever I went out into the event, to always be wearing homemade clothes. Like not even costumes.
No, just homemade, yeah.
Costuming is a whole other mission I have, but homemade clothes, just to be part of that sense of it's all custom, it's all handmade, it's all very, very unique. I wanted to wear as little non-unique things as I could.
You know, at this festival, folks, there's crafts, art, food, and music, and all of these things are original. You can't buy a Pepsi or a Bud Light. There's no corporate sponsorship of anything. it's a hippie fair. What can I say? It's a hippie fair that started out as a fundraiser for a Waldorf school or a Waldorf aligned school, and it just grew from there. But sewing machines, textiles, tapestry. I mean, I saw 2 looms in action out there. People take their things out and work on them in their booth because it's exciting, right? I did not see a treadle sewing machine this year, but in the past, there have been. Here's a lady sitting in her booth, treadling away, and she's making velvet skirts and fairy wings and things like that. And it just really adds to the fun to see somebody actually sewing or working their loom. Or there's a guy out there with a treadle jigsaw.
I did see that guy. I was looking for treadle stuff, and that was the only one I saw. I overheard the words Singer 66 Red Eye when I was standing in line for coffee. Someone was talking about how apparently one of those machines is here, but I only overheard it as a conversation piece. I didn't actually see it myself.
Well, next year I am taking a machine because Corona Hats, which is a booth that we're associated with building the booth and wiring it up, she makes hats. I've referred to her a few times on the show here. Her creative nest is her living room, and right in the center is the quietly whirring sewing machine because she has a commercial machine that's just always on, and she's listening to music and sewing hats and smoking weed and making inventory for the fair, and it is so beautiful. So anyway, she has said several times, TR, bring a sewing machine out to the booth. Set it up. I convinced her to buy a Jackery so she could take her featherweight to the park.
Hell yeah.
She's been so happy about that ever since. So yeah, and I was thinking about my or what we could make crafts and stuff, and we can't, maybe they wouldn't be juried in, but we could sell them after hours. Anyway, Corona wants a machine going in her booth, and it's a nice shady booth, and I think that would be really fun. Also, we could put up a little sign, have you torn your wings? We'll fix them.
For sure. And then I was talking backstage with someone who was working with my husband, just asking me what I do. And I'm like, I'm a podcaster, blah, blah, blah. I mentioned sewing machines. And half a sentence later, so I have some commercial sewing that I need done. Could you help me with that? Immediately. And of course, then because you've trained me, I was like, what do you mean by commercial sewing?
Right. What do you want?
What he meant was heavy duty.
But what was he exactly wanting to make? Or did he have a project?
It was more of a generally, can you help me with several different repairs on canvas and tents and that kind of like larger, heavy duty, bulky stuff. And he just wanted to go to someone who doesn't have a $5,000 minimum order for the work kind of deal. So like in his mind, it's commercial. And I'm like, okay, yes, I do in fact have a machine from 1902 that can do that for you. I will not require $5,000.
Are you talking about the Davis vertical feed?
Of course I am.
Davis vertical feed is going to eat that up.
Exactly. He's like, I have big, heavy duty ground cloths and tents and bags. And I'm like, dude, you don't need a commercial. I got you. I got a treadle. And he's looking at me like, you mean with the foot thing? Like, yes, I mean like with the foot thing. It's a very cool conversation.
Yeah. And then if they really look interested, start blazing away with the details of how a needle feed and a long shuttle works.
That's usually when I lose people. If I haven't lost them by then, that's when they all drop off.
If somebody says the word Singer 66 Red Eye, I'm going to assume they know something about sewing machines.
Oh, that person was definitely one of us.
Yeah.
That was just a rando in the coffee line.
But this dude with the canvas is more like, they have an idea that there are heavy-duty sewing machines, but that's about it. Probably, huh?
Pretty much. So yeah, as per usual, if you talk about your hobbies loudly and frequently, people will come to you with the information, with the nuggets, with the rabbit holes, with the shiny, let's go follow it dopamine.
Yeah.
It comes to you. You like attracts like. If you put it out there, it will come back. That's been my experience with every special interest.
Everything. And it's like when people are like, I don't know how to find friends. I'm like,
yell about the things you like into the void. The void will shout back.
This is actually something that I think that autistic, neurodiverse, shy people are better at is making real friends because we tend to bond around special interests and niche things, right?
Absolutely.
So like you say, if I just yell, if I go, Davis vertical feed, and somebody's going to go, Singer 66 Red Eye, and then we're going to get together and have coffee and talk about stuff, right?
Pretty much. Better than filtering through the person nearest to you and saying, do you like machines in general? No. Be specific, Be enthusiastic. Your people will find you.
Especially at art festivals like this.
Also,
Find
yes.
somebody who's wearing something that's obviously artisanal and ask them, wow, did you make that? And either they can go, yes, I did, or no, I got it from that booth right over there. But still, it's art, right? Art. So I'm still pumped up about wanting to do art in this festival. For those of you like, well, what do you do at this festival? I'm like, well, I'm retired. I'm an elder now. I just get to go and annoy the young people. But for 25 years, I was an entertainer out there playing music on all the stages except the ones that require juggling and fire.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I didn't do the vaudeville stuff. So the fair is, for a lot of us counterculture and creative people out here in Oregon, the fair is Christmas, New Year's, Thanksgiving, Halloween. It's all the holidays rolled into one.
It's our big summer gathering.
It's a homecoming. You see people from all over. It's really fun to help people find that's what I do as an elder now. I just walk around and look for people who are like, they look lost. Hi, welcome to the Oregon Country Fair. Do you need any help finding anything?
And this area was a summer gathering place for the Kalapuya before colonization, right? This has been a summer gathering spot for longer than white people have been squatting here.
Yes. There is a whole archaeology part of the fair that demonstrates traditional skills with a lot of actual local natives are part of that.
Yeah, I meant to get there this year and I just didn't make it. It's like top level priority for next year since I missed it this year.
Well, let's go up next year because they have really cool hands-on crafts that you can do, and one of them is cedar, like basket weaving with actual native materials here, and that would be fun. These natives in this area made some very fine woven textiles out of the inner bark of the red cedar tree. You'd be amazed that it's not scratchy. But yeah, so we're totally like zoomed out from that. I actually took, of course, just like on the plane, I took a project to work on, but I never even got it
Same.
out.
I literally, my embroidery project, I carved out an area that's just solid black that I have to do. And I like marked out the edges of it. So that way at fair, if I wanted, I could just mindlessly put black in and just fill that area in without worrying about counting the stitches. Right. Didn't touch it once, but I knew it was there and it was comforting to know it was there.
Yeah. I was like, I always like to sew something at fair just to kind of get the magic in there. And so I did a really long hem on one of these scarves that I wear around my head to stay cool. Fair is usually pretty warm. We're having a kind of a heat wave as far as Oregon is concerned. I know you folks in like
everywhere else in the world, basically.
Spain, New Orleans, Yuma, Arizona, you're all laughing at us. But the deal is we're just not, their infrastructure's not set up for it. We're set up for long, heavy winter rains. That's what our infrastructure's set up for. When it rains in Yuma, people go skidding off the road. They don't know what to do.
Yeah, it was muggy and hot here yesterday in a way that was very not normal.
Very Midwestern.
Very Midwestern.
Yeah, I think they're even going to bring us some thunderstorms tonight or tomorrow. But anyway, yeah, so it would definitely be a good day to drag the treadle outside. And so, actually, no, it's just too hot for that. But it is a good day to sit in the studio here and talk about sewing machines and get back in the groove of recording with our little group of buddies here. And I'm just so happy that all of you are here. We've had a lot of activity on our socials and stuff lately and some emails, and I want to save that for the next recording because we've got some great letters and comments to talk about. But I want to get to today's main topic, lubrication. Ooh, lubrication of your sewing machine. This is a wonderful post made by David Werther, who is the Mr. Featherweightology. Featherweightology is his Facebook group, and David is a really he's one of the guys you should listen to. He's good. And so I asked him if I could read this on the podcast. I think he's a listener now because I just thought it was such a good essay on lubrication. So this is David Werther from Featherweightology. In another vintage sewing machine group here on Facebook, there was a discussion about what grease to use on gears and motors. Some people responded with misinformation, and unlike my usual modus operandi of sticking my nose where it might not belong and opening my big mouth, I uncharacteristically chose not to respond. Sometimes it's just like, no, I just don't even want to go there again. Okay, so David says, however, my nose and mouth are well represented below. Grab your beverage of choice. Read this when you have time. Think for yourself and choose wisely. Okay, I got my beverage right here. I love that attitude. Okay, first, the two different applications for lubricating gear teeth and motor shafts should be considered separately when possible. They are two very different mechanical situations that call for a different method of lubrication. What exactly is lubrication? Simply stated, for sewing machine applications, it is a thin film of slippery molecules intended to reduce friction between two metal parts which are rubbing together. Less friction means less heat and less wear, resulting in quieter operation and longer life of the metal parts of the machine. Lubrication can be much more complicated in other machines, such as carrying away heat in the oil, as in automotive engines and transmissions, or supporting the weight of large masses, such as in power turbines. But we don't have those situations in sewing machines, so lubrication for us is relatively simple. In sewing machines, a lubricant has to do two things before it can begin to do its job of separating the two metal parts in contact. This is good. It first has to get where it needs to go and stay there. The second, it needs to have the correct properties to do its job. In many sewing machine applications, we don't put the lubricant where it needs to go, do we? Oh, sure, when we put a drop of oil on the needle bar and then cycle the machine, we're putting oil right on one of the parts we need to lubricate. But we are relying on that oil to flow also into the needle bar bushing or housing so that the oil presents a barrier film between the needle bar and the bushing. In many other places, we drip a drop of oil into a hole and rely on it to flow where it needs to go to separate the moving parts with thin and slippery film. Both the flow and the slippery characteristics of this lubricant are important in these applications. For the latter cannot do its job without the former. Okay, so you can't have slipperiness without flow. So the flow quality of the oil here is what he's talking about. You put it in where it says to, but is it going to flow where it needs to go to do the slip?
The viscosity is an incredibly important factor. It can't leave that up to chance.
Yes. However, David continues, there are times when we don't want our lubricant to flow. Instead of coating the entire inside of the hole and outside of the shaft in that hole with a slippery film, we only need that film on a specific location. We don't want it to flow. We need it to stay where we put it. Gear lubrication is such an application. Okay, so what he's saying here is, okay, now we're talking about a different type of mechanical meeting here. Gears have teeth.
Okay, so all the parts in a machine that are not gears and then gears. Okay, yeah, I'd never really thought about that being meaningfully different. But yeah, there are two categories.
Mechanically different operations here. We've got these gear teeth that are meshing. That's one thing. And then we've got these other things where parts have to flow smoothly, right?
Right.
Okay,
right,
so he's set up these two different scenarios of what's happening inside the machine. if your machine has gears. Gear sets in sewing machines do two things. They transfer power from one shaft to another, and they change the direction of that force, usually 90 degrees. They do this by the engagement of the teeth on one gear driving the teeth on the other gear. In reality, this happens one gear tooth at a time. One tooth on the driving gear is transferring all the load to one tooth on the driven gear. Driving gear, driven gear. Without going into a lot of detail about involute tooth profiles and spiral bevel versus helical gears.
Wow, thank you.
We have all three on sewing machines.
Jesus, okay.
I'm picturing those on the 201, as he's saying.
These are very cool words. I like them.
Oh, God. Yeah, man. Involute, bevel, helical. Yeah. So we have all three of those cool sounding gears on a sewing machine. There is some partial contact with the leading and trailing gear teeth, but the load is transferred from one tooth sliding its point of contact with the tooth on the other gear at the pitch line. This sounds like car transmission stuff to me.
I mean, it's kind of like a microcosm, right? This is a non-internal combustion engine version of the same basic concept.
Oh, yeah. It's a basic powertrain. Doesn't matter if it's electricity or steam or a water wheel or what driving it. The powertrain, the gear train, is the same. Okay. The force is concentrated in a very small area, and we need a special kind of lubricant to stay in that specific area and not flow. Where that teeth is transferring that load, the lubricant needs to stay there and not flow.
It's not a sliding action. It's a
pushing
action.
Right.
Brain galaxy mode.
Isn't this great stuff? That's why when I read this, I messaged him, David, can I just read this on the podcast? This is so cool.
Nerd. This is the good, high quality, top shelf nerd shit right here.
Okay. Let's repeat that last sentence. The force is concentrated in a very small area, and we need a special kind of lubricant to stay in that specific area and not flow. And we need that lubricant to possess the molecular film strength not to break down under the heat and more extreme pressure of point-to-point contact in the gears. Wow. So it's got to be a whole different formulation of stuff. All right. Grease and oil are not the same thing.
Yeah. There's so many different kinds of force transfer happening to make a sewing machine happen. Yes, there's simple machines, but the simple machine is still...
No, they're not simple.
It's only simple compared to bigger, more complicated machines. It's not simple.
Okay, so picture a mixing board at a recording studio. It looks just massive, right? Oh my God. That's just 36 of the same channels. It looks like a whole lot of knobs and dials, but they're just... So it's the same with... Once you start building a powertrain, you've got those three kinds of gears.
Sure,
maybe
right.
maybe a worm gear in there. But it's just more of the same.
It doesn't matter if it's as big as a school bus or as small as like a knitting needle. Like it's the same concept.
Yeah, your sewing machine has a lot of the same parts as your car, as your Mixomatic, as your cement mixer. Okay, gears. Okay, so then David says, at this point, your eyes are glazing over with all the technical jargon.
No, we're salivating.
No, more.
Our pituitaries are just bursting.
Involute. Helical. Okay, so at this point, your eyes are glazing over, but the point is, gear lubrication is a different animal than the rotational lubrication requirements of the rest of the machine. This is why your featherweight or other machine came with a can of oil and a tube of grease. Before anyone gets all wrapped around the axle about the terms lubricant and grease...
Wrapped around the axle. Fantastic.
Getting your undies in a bunch.
Yeah, totally. But more unique.
Before anyone gets all wrapped around the axle about the terms lubricant and grease, let's agree on this simplified point. If you slosh it on the wall and it runs on the floor, it is oil. If you flip a blob of it on the wall and it stays there, it is grease. Both are lubricants.
I mean,
got it.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I mean, and that relates over to food too, right?
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay.
Grease is basically just oil that stays where you put it and doesn't flow.
All about that viscosity.
Except that when you heat grease, its viscosity, which is resistance to flow, viscosity is reduced, and it does behave like an oil as far as flow is concerned. In the sewing machine world, a lot of people don't like to use the word grease. They say the two different friction reducers are oil and lubricant. They don't like to say grease because grease becomes oil when it is heated, and that is confusing.
But they're both lubricants. How is this less confusing? Okay, whatever.
Oh, how are avocado oil and peanut oil different? and what about butter? Okay, there is another reason. In the, quote, olden days, grease was basically oil emulsified, meaning dissolved, in a thickener carrier, which was basically a soap or clay.
Oh.
As the grease was heated, some of the oil melted out of the carrier and performed the lubrication duties. But after many years in heat cycles, all the oil came out of the carrier, and what was left was just the soap or clay, much harder than the original grease. This is what the original Singer gear and motor lubricant was, the same as was in the wheel bearings of cars back then. That is why we dig the old grease out of the grease tubes on our featherweight to make room for the new grease. Now, not any place where any motor that has the grease tubes and people go, well, can't I just put new oil in? Isn't it just melting out the bottom? No, the grease actually...
Because there was a carrier that isn't grease and won't flow out. It's a whole specifically left behind residue thing.
Oh, like that great old car commercial used to... I can't remember which oil it was. Don't have a loss of viscosity. Use our oil. Anyway, so you want to get all the old crap out and then put the new stuff in. This is also why older sewing machine manuals will say flush your bearings and everything with kerosene. To clean all that crap out and then start over. And like on my VS3 that I just bought, they hadn't done that. They had just kept putting more and more and more and more oil. That machine doesn't take any grease. But, yeah.
So then, but with things like the needle bar, you don't have to do that because you just put the oil on it and it slides up and down and then it goes away and then you put more oil on it. And it's not the same kind of thing.
No, but where it has run, yeah, it's ew. Okay. So he says, dig out the grain. Modern synthetic grease. This is what we buy now. People buy a featherweight and it comes with that lead tube of old grease and it's like, no. A, it's made out of lead. B, it's no good. Get new grease. Okay. I mean, the tube is made out of lead. You should not handle that. You should throw that.
Why would the tube be made out of it? Oh, because it's soft and squishy, so you can
soft and squishy.
Like a toothpaste tube, but for your machine. Oh.
Old toothpaste tubes were made out of lead, too.
What, seriously?
Yes, seriously.
Oh, that explains a lot.
Okay. Modern synthetic grease is made up of long-chain molecules that give it both the viscosity, which is thickness and resistance to flow, and lubricating properties without the use of a separate carrier. Modern synthetic greases are both a grease and an oil, depending on the temperature. So some people prefer to call them lubricant instead of grease. Man, we are in the weeds here.
Terminology in hobby spaces is wild.
Oh, people will get into like scissor fights.
Yeah, dying on hills is normal at this point.
Yeah. By the way, those olden days are within most of our lifetimes, and this grease monkey auto truck mechanic used many a different axle grease in his early years. I'm sure I have a can of it on the back shelf in my garage. Okay, you can understand why oil is a poor choice for gear lubrication on a sewing machine. First, it flows, so it will simply drip off the gears due to gravity. Being of low viscosity, it will also be easily thrown off the rapidly rotating gears due to centrifugal force. And finally, the shorter chain molecules and lack of film strength will cause what little oil that remains on the two gear teeth in contact to be displaced. The result will be friction, noise, and wear. Why the caps, capital letters, on for a sewing machine? Okay, so he's going to explain. Oh, now, what about this? Oil is an excellent lubricant for gears in an oil bath or with a pressurized or splash lubricated oiling system. The automatic transmission of your car is a good example, but those are closed systems where oil is constantly circulated back into the gears. There are no such systems on domestic sewing machines. Some industrial sewing machines have these lubrication systems. Oh, yes, they do. My sewing machine, when I worked for ICI, had a little window so you could keep an eye on your oil level.
Oh, wow.
It was a Consew needle feed. 6,000 stitches per minute. Then don't touch the needle after you finish a seam. It will burn your finger. Okay. But this machine had an oil pan like a car and a pump that when the machine was going, the pump was mechanically bringing the oil up into the head and through all the bearings, just like a freaking car.
Wow.
And at the shop, our sewing machine oil came in those 1 gallon cans. You know, she's a half a pint low. You're filling her up there,
Another bucket of gas.
Another bucket of gas. David continues. The above is going to drive the singer 201 people to apoplexy, which is a great word. That's a
very
old
good
word
word.
for
Yeah.
having a stroke. It's the old word for having a stroke. They will claim that the gears on a 201 are different and that the manual calls for oil on the gears. They will call for my head on a chopping block, but they are not thinking it through. Yes, the 201 was designed for oil on the gears and has oil cups under the machine to catch all the dripped oil. And users were required to oil those gears frequently, like every day, or at least every week. Do you think the average 201 user oiled those gears after every 8-hour day of sewing? Every week? Maybe every month? There is no difference in the gears. Same steel, same heat treatment, same tooth profile, different era. Singer assumed that the heavy user or professional sewer would indeed protect their considerable investment in what was arguably Singer's most expensive and smoothest running domestic machine. This was partly due to the lower friction of freshly oiled gears. They figured they would oil the gears every day and drain the oil cups periodically. Many may have oiled their machines frequently due to having grown up on the farm or around a factory where oiling machines was common and required. I guarantee you most 201 users today don't oil the gears very often, and the ones who bring their machines in for service never oil them. Those users are much better off when a service person puts a good synthetic grease on their 201 gears and sends them away. Just like I am better off staying away from 201 people who hate me for even suggesting grease on gears. Wow, I thought featherweight people were crazy.
Yeah,
He's saying 201 people.
Ooh, that is some spicy drama.
Now, we have seen, you've cleaned a lot of 201s. I've owned and sewed on dozens of them. They have those 2 caps on the gear trains underneath. I've always just packed them with grease. I never knew that the manual called for oil because I saw gears and I went, gears, grease.
Today we learned.
Yeah. Okay. Here's David again. In grease lubricated sewing machine motors, the requirement is much different. Now, we've talked about these. This is grease lubricated motors are like the one on the 1591, the 201, the featherweight, the 66. They got the little silver. Either they've got the little silver tubes that you put the grease in, like on the featherweight, like one on each end of the motor, or they've got those big grease wick underneath things. You have them on Exuberant. They're right in from the hand wheel, and they come on the bottom of the motor. Those are grease tubes. So, in grease lubricated sewing machine motors, the requirement is much different. The idea is that as the machine is used and the motor heats up, the grease heats up too and liquefies somewhat, not completely into a liquid, as that would cause it to flow through the wick and saturate the inside of the motor. Little blue puffs of smoke, right? The same as if you had put a lot of oil in the motor. No, we want the grease to only liquefy to the point that capillary action of the fibers in the wick will draw the lubricant down to the outside of the hole in the bushing where it will flow down to the motor shaft. And we want that to happen time and time again until all the grease is gone and we refill the tube. The friction inside that motor is not a point-to-point contact like the gear teeth. It is the rotational contact of the hole inside of the bushing to all the surface area of the motor shaft that is inside that bushing. So it's a rotational thing, like oil on the top of the machine, right? We want the grease to flow around that shaft and form a barrier film between it and the bushing. So, gears, we don't want flow. We do want a thick film to resist displacement by the gear teeth. Motors, we do want flow, and we want a thin film to coat and separate the shaft and bushing. Can one lubricant do both? Singer must have thought so because they only gave us one tube of motor and gear lubricant. But think for yourself here. It has to be a compromise. One product can't do both effectively, can it? The answer is, or at least was, that it can do both well enough so long as it was properly applied at the recommended intervals. The proof of this statement lies in the survival of so many vintage machines. Have you ever seen a featherweight with worn-out gears? Have you ever seen a motor with bronze bushings worn into an egg-shaped hole? Me neither. That old Singer stuff must have worked well enough. Many of us remember fondly the old cars of the 50s and 60s. Oh, those fins and wonderful styling. But styling aside, were they really that great? Would I trade it for my modern car for everyday driving? Not no, but hell no.
Sure, yeah.
We don't miss those drum brakes that lock up when you hit them hard and fade when they get wet. We don't miss column shift manual transmissions in today's traffic. We don't miss ignition that would stop working if you drove through water. He goes on and on. I love the idea of old cars, but not the reality of driving them.
Sure, yeah.
Well, come on, you gotta try my Volvo, David.
Well, but it's a point that, like, over time we do engineer better mechanics and better, chemical things. Like, yeah, we're not starting out at our best with this stuff.
Sure. So, he says, grease and oil have improved as well. We now have synthetic products that don't oxidize and break down as quickly. They maintain their lubricating properties and film strength as their temperature increases and viscosity decreases. They are just better. Today we have better lubricants that will do both the disparate jobs of motor and gear lubrication with one product. This is not to say you can't find a different product that is tackier and more suited to remaining in place on gears. You can if you want to spend the money. But just as Singer felt one product was good enough, today we have one product that is even better, suitable and quite good enough. So he says, basically, think for yourself, understand what you're doing. He's very happy with the single product that he uses and sells, which is the basic motor and gear lube. I use a thing called, what the heck is it? So Retro Sewing Grease. I get it from the Featherweight shop. And it's formulated specifically to do the things he's talking about here, but it comes in a neat little retro container and stuff.
The styling on the outside is fine, you can have the new stuff on the inside and still have the cool fins and old-timey fonts and whatever on the outside. That's cool.
Now, this is the wrap up here. Note, my opinions come from 50 years of experience in the automotive and industrial machinery world. I've been involved in and worked on everything from motorcycle engines to the giant engines and container ships, on gearboxes that you can hold in your hands, to steel gearboxes as large as an apartment. It has been an interesting and exciting life, and I continue to enjoy the mechanical world of vintage sewing machines. Damn! Thank you so much, David. That's Mr. David Werther.
That was a very fun letter.
That was actually a comment on an FB featherweight group.
Oh, wow.
He just hopped in. But I just felt it was so important that people outside of that little featherweight group needed to hear it. So
I enjoyed that very much. That explanation made so much visual sense to me. I have a hard time with understanding this stuff verbally sometimes. And 50 years of experience shows in how clear that explanation came across, even into my brain.
Very well explained. If he would have said he was a physics teacher, yeah, man.
Totally.
I believe you. David, thanks again for graciously sharing that knowledge with all, 300 of you out there now? Something like that? I don't know.
I don't know. I would like to think so.
My God, it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. I just completely lost my train of thought. That was so much of a huge blast of words, somebody else's words there.
So what I kept thinking about throughout all of that, aside from being impressed with my ability to understand what he was saying, I just kept thinking about how I could make it into like a geology analogy. Because I was thinking about the different kinds of faults. Specifically.
Ooh.
And more specifically than different kinds of faults, I was thinking about different kinds of metamorphosis, right? So in geology, as rocks metamorphose, right? So in the rock cycle, I'm sure everyone's familiar with the basic concept of the rock cycle, right? You get fresh rocks, they break down, they turn into other rocks. That's the rock cycle, right? You've got your igneous, your sedimentary, your metamorphic, right? It's just the life cycle. In the metamorphic part of that, well, really in all parts of it, but especially in the metamorphic part, there's two main things that make a difference in what the chemistry becomes, and that's pressure and temperature. And those two things are, broadly speaking, mostly influenced by how deeply buried they are at the time, right? Because obviously as you go down in the crust, it gets both warmer and more tightly compacted, right?
Right.
Like we don't live over an ocean of magma, right? We live over this weird hot plastic thing that becomes magma at surface pressures. That's how the crust of the earth into the mantle works. But in specific situations, you can get some very unique combinations of pressure and temperature, right? It's not always a linear relationship as you go down. And one of my favorite kinds of metamorphic rock is subduction zone rocks, because we live on a subduction zone, right? And that is the very unique profile of high pressure, but low temperature.
Right.
Because it's very, very shallow, right? Subduction is where one plate dips below another. So you're at more or less surface conditions. You're at the top of the pressure gradient. There's almost no pressure happening, no temperature at all. And then they push together. And the pressure comes entirely from that lateral and downward motion. And so it creates a very different kind of rock where you get the water essentially pushed into the molecular structure. And also there's usually a lot of water because this is happening in the ocean, right? So the sediments that are getting crushed have as much water as they could possibly have. And the water, because the temperature is low, the water isn't driven off as steam. The water stays liquid, but it's pressurized so hard that it ends up being forced into the minerals, and it turns the minerals into these weird slippy textures. When you actually get to hold the rocks later, they have serpentinite is one of the rokes that you find out here on the coast. It's pretty rare. It's only from these certain subduction zones, and it's slippy.
Wow.
It feels like...
Is it like soapstone?
Not like clay. Yeah, kind of like soapstone, not quite. It's this very distinct texture that I can always tell now because I'm kind of obsessed with it. It's one of my favorite rocks.
Right. Cool.
And so, I was just thinking about the role of water in that dynamic as you were talking about grease and its need to move or not. And of how it's, again, about pressure and temperature. Because, sewing machines, there is no temperature. Sewing machines are like a subduction zone. They are only about pressure. There's really not much temperature to speak of in that.
The only temperature is in the motor.
Right, yeah.
Shaft.
So I was just kind of trying to be like, how can I understand this in terms of geology? Oh, it kind of reminds me of my very favorite nerdy geological feature.
Wow. What about when you said geology, my mind went right to coal and oil.
Oh, yeah.
How those are from the same ingredients, aren't they?
Well, kind of.
I
can explain the difference.
Yeah, I want to know.
Coal is made out of ancient forests, specifically.
Oh, right. Okay.
Because coal was formed from forests that fell over before lignin-eating microbes and fungus existed.
Yes, that's why the coal age can never happen again.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
specifically an artifact of the fact that there was not a waste disposal system for the structure that was built. And obviously now we live in the Pacific Northwest. We know how quickly trees can be destroyed by microbes and fungi, but those didn't exist in the Carboniferous. So that's where coal
Carboniferous,
comes from,
it.
is those forests, whereas oil comes from the ocean and all of the little
algae.
Yeah, microbiology out there in the ocean. Lingon's not a factor out there.
No,
because ocean and stuff. So that's why they're fundamentally different in terms of the structure of the rock that we get them out of.
All right. Somehow I had in my mind that one was just like a more crunchy version of the other. But they're two different things, really.
They're fundamentally two different things. They're both fossil fuels. They're both fossil sun energy.
They're fossil fuels. Oh, grease and oil are both lubricants. Oil and coal are both fossil fuels, right?
Yeah. And I learned a thing, a couple months ago. Forget what the name of it was, but it's this kind of rock that was found in somewhere in Western Russia. It had a name like of the tiny little town where it was first identified. But it is fundamentally oil that's too old.
Oh my God.
It's like over 1 billion years old, and it's so dense and so cooked and has been in the earth getting subjected to temperature and pressure for so long that it's become too dense to burn. It's this like next stage. It's metamorphosed oil, and you can use it for some cool industrial applications. It has some very interesting properties, almost more like graphite because of the way it's pushed together. But it's literally, it was oil. It could have been oil, but it's so old that it's actually something else. And
that is cool.
Tunguskite, something like that.
Oh, from Tunguska, which is where
something like
comet
that.
blew up.
It wasn't Tunguska, but it was that part of the world, and it's a name that. I'll put it in my end cap for the proper episode. But yeah, it turns out fossil fuels can go bad in the ground if you don't get to them fast enough because they're 1.4 billion years old or whatever.
Temperature and pressure does stuff,
It really does. It's kind of like how diamonds are in fact not forever. Diamonds actually fall apart at surface conditions quite fast.
Really?
Yes, this is part of why diamonds are so rare, is because they form at an incredibly deep, high pressure and temperature context, and then they get shot to the surface really, really fast. That's the only way you get diamonds at the surface, is you have a volcanic eruption that moves those things much faster than natural like erosion and isostatic uplift would bring them. If they come up too slowly, you'll find instead of diamonds, you'll find little pockets of graphite. Diamonds, they essentially expand and decay under surface conditions, and they become graphite.
Like that weird rock in your creek, that it's fine when it's underwater, but if you take it out, it breaks apart into all those weird flakes.
Yeah.
It's like a clay stone.
Yeah, totally. So diamonds, part of the reason why they're rare is because they are in fact not forever.
My God, we're learning so much today.
Geology and sewing machines, man. I can make them go together.
Damn. Wow. Well, there is so much to talk about, folks. But for now, I think we're approaching our limit of recharge. And again, I want to thank David Werther for that excellent deep dive on oil and grease and lubrication and how the internal parts of your sewing machine need very specific things. And when in doubt, read your instruction manual. Or maybe you could ask David. He's threaded.
And there you have it, a profoundly nerdy conversation about sewing machine lubrication, courtesy of David Werther on the Featherweightology Facebook group. Thank you again so much for permission to make content out of your expertise. I really enjoyed getting this stuff explained in a way that actually clicked. It clicked so much that I was actually able to explain the topic to my spouse yesterday, and he was totally into it and had his own subconscious back burner questions about the topic answered by what I was able to articulate. A lecture is good when a student can meaningfully bring another person into the fold. The rock whose name I couldn't remember is shungite, and I learned about it from a SciShow video on YouTube that I will link in the show notes. Next week, we're talking about the Arlington sewing machine. A badged machine, of course, but one with an interesting history worth exploring. Also, there's some fan mail and other mail that just generally comes from you guys and is interesting. You're welcome again for not actually taking that week break that I promised last week. As a reminder, we are unofficially sponsored by Stagecoach Road Vintage Sewing Machine. You can reach them at srvsew@gmail.com. Follow us on social media and YouTube, and you can best support us by sharing the podcast with your friends. You can even get ad-free episodes by joining our Patreon at patreon.com/used2sew. Thank you for listening to us here at Used to Sew. We always welcome your additions, corrections, and feedback in general. Please reach out to us via email at usedtosew@gmail.com. Used to Sew is a production of Fox and Raven Media. For more podcasts from Fox and Raven Media, visit our website at foxandravenmedia.com.